Hello, friends. Welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Nyong'a, and I've seen almost nothing.
I'm Nella, and I'm full of delicious salad, of which I will always eat over saltwater taffy, which is gross.
Just getting that out of the way.
Yes, I need to put the line in the sand here and now. Saltwater taffy is gross. I never understood why my brother loved it. Like that and fudge. He also really loved fudge. And I'm like, is it because it was just made of sugar and a vacation treat?
Yes.
Probably.
Sounds delicious.
A thing you eat on vacation that's super sugary.
We would go to perfectly cromulent ice cream parlors, and he would want fudge instead. And I'd be like, but there's ice cream. The greatest gift to mankind.
On this episode of Binge O'Clock, we are discussing Fringe Season 2, episodes 16 through 18, where we encountered the best 80s theme song to ever grace us. I love that opening. It's one of my favorite things. Past Fringe, which we'll get to very quickly because I know some people on this call have very strong opinions about that episode. We also experienced Cancer by Touch.
Murder cancer.
Murder cancer.
Murder cancer.
It's murder cancer. Like, cancer will kill you, but you don't use it as a murder weapon.
No.
There's the episode title. Murder cancer. And a man who has broken the time-space continuum to be with his wife one last time, and also white tulips.
Can't wait to bring some Star Trek into this, but shall we begin in the 80s?
Of course.
Where it all began. All right. I just have to get this right off the bat. So this is the flashback episode. And remember how we were all like, oh, Carla Warren, the woman who got killed in the lab.
The assistant.
Right? And like,
who got killed in the lab.
Right? It's like, and everyone kind of talks about her and frames her like she was this pretty young thing that was doing this for like extra credit work. Like she was just like doing work that she had no really place for, and it was like super. She meanwhile has like 3 degrees in theoretical physics.
That is correct.
I'm so angry at the show. She's a swear jar PhD.
It is really hard to be a young, blonde, female lab tech.
I wish she was still alive so she and Astrid could like exchange war stories. Oh, you work with Walter Bishop. It would be so great. Oh, like, and another woman who everyone underestimates entirely. Hello, Astrid.
Wildly.
It happens before we hear the 80s theme song. It happens immediately. Nella was like, did they just say Dr. Carla Warren?
That they did.
And it was just like,
yeah. I was ready to throw hands.
Someone was about to catch these hands.
They didn't know their end game, and then they realized, well, why don't we make her a PhD?
Mm-hmm.
Which I appreciate, don't get me wrong. But then it's also like, it makes thinking back on how she'd been talked about and how she'd been framed infuriating.
I mean, yes, and 100% what I would have expected from Walter in the 80s, and Walter reflecting on the 80s. Like, this is not uncharacteristic behavior. We see how he treats Astrid today.
Yeah.
Can't even remember her name.
I mean, mind you, but this is also a Walter with, like, actual brain damage. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, we keep setting up that Walter is not the man he used to be. I mean, yeah, sure, he acts like he's the smartest guy in the room, but he's not dismissive of her smarts either. He just doesn't like her telling him, don't do the thing. Maybe don't do the thing?
Well, like so many myopic people. I mean, I think what bothers me most is they call her an assistant in season 1, and they make her sound like this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed college student who is just there to, and like the entire season 1, we see all these people who have been hurt by Walter Bishop, culminating, one assumes, in this poor college kid who ended up dying in a fire in his lab.
Even her own mother treated her like that, or talked about her like that. And I know she's your baby, but come on, 3 PhDs, 3 of them.
I know, wildly overqualified for her role. Characteristic of the times.
I mean, look, we can argue
and all
that
she could do is be an assistant to Dr. Walter Bishop.
Or it's the only work that she found interesting that actually let her in the lab. I mean, sure, we can argue that. I mean, look, I didn't get the feeling from this blast from the past that, like, he treated her like an assistant, like he does with Astrid. I didn't get that feeling, but, like, I don't know. It's weird.
I know. We also didn't get to see them interacting too much other than
arguing.
Exactly. Other than her disagreeing vehemently with his decisions.
And, you know, calling mommy to come and stop him.
Mommy Nina.
It's so true, though. She shows up at the lake, and Nella was like, yeah, you followed him. And then I was like, Nella, look.
Just wait.
And Nina comes out of the shadows, and it's like, yeah!
With the most fabulous hat.
Sick 'em.
So good. Anyway, so in this flashback episode, we find out what happened with Peter. Like, we finally get that unpacked about how the Peter of our universe died of his genetic disease. And we are shown how Walter was able to build a window, a TV almost, into the alternate universe. And he had been spying on, he calls him Walternate.
Love it.
I do love
Such
that.
a good name.
It's so good.
It's very good. But spying on Walternate in order to try and see where, if Walter, because if this was happening to his Peter, it must be happening to his Peter. And he is so far advanced, maybe he comes up with a cure and maybe I can save my Peter by watching him. And that's a really great idea and a really great scene. And we see where September messes everything up and gets this entire ball rolling. Where September distracts Walternate and he misses the chemical reaction that proves he was correct. But when he turns around, it looks like it goes unchanged. And Walter is not the kind of person who repeats an experiment. If it didn't work, you move on.
Not great science, but nevertheless.
I mean, he's working on a clock, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's valid when you only have so much time before a child dies.
Yeah.
So I think had he had more time, he probably would have gone back and tested things. I like the little tidbit that both Peters know the coin trick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really sweet that the alternate Peter, it's his mom, shows him the coin trick.
Yeah.
I love that it's exactly the same conversation, but in one universe it's with Walter and in the other it's with Elizabeth. I also love this episode because I feel like it brought together so many little bits of the story, like these jigsaw puzzle pieces that have been just kind of scattered around, right? Like you said, Nella, we find out the entire story behind Peter, obviously. But we also finally get the real story behind September saving them from the lake and why that happened, right? Which is September attempting to correct his mistake.
Yeah.
So that was a great little callback as well.
I also just love him talking to the other observers, but but you have to admit, it's the only way to witness the moment.
Oh, and I was so happy to see August again.
I know.
As they're walking out of the movie theater. With their big red drinks.
Giant slushies.
Oh, I loved it. This episode also, though, kind of throws other things into question. I found myself just really kind of wondering now how the show is going to address Walter experimenting on Peter. Because I feel like now the question is Peter remembering his Walternate father? Is this what Walter did to Peter once he brought him over and then went, well, he's my son, but he's not my son. Ooh, scientific moment. And then started experimenting on alternate Peter because yes, he's my boy, but he's not my boy. One must not, miss this science opportunity. And I was wondering, does that ever get resolved? Is it that Peter remembers his life in his own universe, or did this happen after the crossover?
I mean, I would buy the fact that it happened to Peter from both Walters.
Yeah, right. Why not both?
Why not both?
But the thing was, we'll never know from the other Peter unless Walter. And now I'm wondering, wait, did Walter ever admit to it? Oh yes, the experiments I used to do on you. So he must have. But then again, there's no timeline for those.
I think he admitted to at least one.
He did.
Which was the electrodes.
Yeah.
and the car, that one like late night.
But again, was it before or after the crossover? Did he do it to his original Peter, or this has only happened to alternate Peter?
Or is Walter only agreeing to throw Peter off the scent of not questioning if it was him or not?
I don't know if Walter's together enough to do that, because he's constantly bringing up things like, oh, you love custard. Remember how custard is your favorite birthday treat? No, that's other Peter.
I would say that, yeah.
Or I can't lose him again. What do you mean, Walter?
He's just not too conniving, our Walter.
What's interesting about this conversation, and Nella and I sort of talked about this briefly right after it happened and when we witnessed it, is I was like, well, who's to say it's not Walternate doing experiments on his own son? And also, this does not negate the actual child abuse that Walter and William Bell did to other children.
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, how did this anyone's game?
I know. And I mean, speaking of Walter's unseemly past, this episode gave us Walter's side of the story, right? And I do love kind of the narrative framework of he's telling this entire story to Olivia. So Olivia's the bookends on either side of this episode.
Yes,
where
it's a frame story.
It's a frame story. Were you waiting for it? Viewers, here you go. But we are literally getting Walter's side of the story, which gives us a little bit of the ethos behind the story. I think prior to this point, because Walter is kind of a monstrous figure, some little part of me when I was first watching the show fully believed that he just went over there and kidnapped his kid who was still alive. You know, which technically is what happened.
Yeah.
However.
No, but this fleshes it out with
cashed.
Like, it's almost like when you try to plan the perfect murder and it doesn't exist, and every little step that goes wrong along the way and there's no going back. And that's what happened to Walter, even though his intention was, I will go there, I will cure him, and I will come back alone. But then the vial breaks. Okay, well, I have to take.
I have my lab.
I have more ready on the other side. If I take him, this will move it along even faster. Great. So he takes the kid. Great. Then he falls through the ice with the kid. So
putting
his
a generator on a frozen lake turns out bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
Who knew?
Man's a scientist.
Not that kind of scientist.
He didn't think with his brain meat.
But yes,
Sorry,
the
I
vial
will
breaks.
forever be mad about that particular moment. Like, you put a ring of something that looked like it got very warm on a frozen lake. You get what you get.
I mean, he said like, oh, but the lake will absorb the energy from the thing, and it's just like, well, energy is heat. You know what? You were distraught. You just lost your son, and you were trying to find a quick way.
Yep.
Across.
So now the final piece of this entire plan that goes wrong is that Elizabeth shows up at the lab, sees her son, gives him a hug, and Walter realizes neither of us can ever let him go.
Yeah.
Which is the heartbreaking piece of this as well, because Elizabeth was never supposed to see other Peter. Absolutely not.
Never, ever, ever. And Walter made a promise to Walternate's Elizabeth that he would bring him home.
Yeah.
And he breaks it right then and there when his Elizabeth is like, just looks at him, and Walter is like, yeah, I know, I guess we're keeping him.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very touching story. And I do think it's told with Walter as like the hero of the story, even though he wanted to be the hero of the story, but not in this way. Right?
No.
Like, he wanted it to work out better than it did. He wanted so many other things to happen.
Right? A version of Peter to survive happily with his family. That's all Walter wanted, really.
I mean, I don't think Walter would have went over if September hadn't distracted Walternate and therefore made him not get the cure. Like,
exactly.
This never would have happened had September not done that, which is also where August is like, an opportunity will present itself because this Walter doesn't know when to say no.
And also, as you said, puts heavy machinery on a frozen lake.
Yes.
At any rate.
Bless. So this happens. And, to remind the listeners, this is basically because Olivia was like, so I know he's from the alternate reality. What the hell? And Walter explains all this. And then in the next episode, Olivia's like, look, I know I promised you that I wouldn't tell Peter and that you need to tell Peter, but I can't keep something like this from Peter. It's going to tear me up inside. If I was in Peter's position and he was in mine, I would want him to tell me. And I think Walters is genuinely understanding about that while also being very much like, as soon as Peter knows, he's going to disown me. He's going to never talk to me again. He will never forgive me. And I can't let that happen. But then he's just like, okay, well, just please let me be the one to tell him. And then we get so many furtive glances between Olivia and Walter in this episode.
And poor Peter, for all 3 of these episodes, actually, is just kind of flitting around in the background, trying to figure out why everyone is so upset at him and awkward around him.
Upset?
All of a sudden, like, first it was Olivia, and then it was Walter, and then it's kind of Olivia again.
What did I do wrong?
What have I done?
Is it me?
And then he even tries to do that thing where it's like, so I noticed you've been awkward. And I think I know why. Trying to like prod the answer from Olivia. And meanwhile, Olivia's like, yeah, huh?
I love how he calls Walter, Olivia, and him their little family unit in that conversation. It is so cute. Oh, Peter.
Joshua Jackson is like one of the most underrated actors, I swear, on the face of the planet, because he makes everything he says realistic. He is on a show where the 90% of it is nonsense, and somehow he manages to make it all sound super relatable.
Yeah. That's a skill.
It's a skill.
It is a skill. So we've transitioned, I think, into episode 17.
Yes. I think so, yes.
Olivia in the lab with the revolver.
How did do we want to get the Sam out of the way? Did we not like Sam in this episode? Is it upsetting?
So I think I'd like Sam better if he was just some guy down and we're like, the FBI has its bowling league and he's just this guy who knows better than to ask questions of like government people. But like you come in enough and he's seen you enough and like he's just like, hey, let's talk about a thing without talking about the thing, because obviously you can't talk about the thing, instead of being like a freaking recommendation from Nina to bypass like adult therapy.
Yeah, I also need him. I know that this is his shtick, and for some reason, it just personally really gets under my skin, but I need him to stop with the fake psychic, whatever you want to call it.
I wish the listeners at home could see the hand gestures that Danielle is putting out there.
Know. Like,
it's like, I don't know what it is.
Literally every single conversation with her. You've been living in this apartment for a while, but your boxes are unpacked. It must be this. Or when he, she goes to see him at, 5, 6 something in the morning, and he goes, you must not be sleeping. Yep.
No swear jar. Sherlock.
That is exactly what was going through my head. And then he takes it a step further and goes, I know what must be bothering you. You're a police officer. Police officers make dozens of decisions a day. They're life and death decisions. Clearly, you're upset about one of them. Am I right? And it's like that thing where you open up, whatever it is you do. If it's checking your horoscope, if it's opening up a fortune cookie, if it's, and it says something, there will be
your magic 8-ball.
There will be conflict in your future. Yes, of course there will be, because there's always conflict in your future.
A walking horoscope. That's Sam Weiss.
It bothers me so much. It bothers me so much, and it bothers me that she thinks it's either really funny or really insightful, because I feel like it is neither.
I would like to think that she's just humoring him.
Yes, that's what I mean. I think that she thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
But I don't.
And again, like sometimes when someone you meet is such a bullshit artist, you can't help but like them. Because in a way it's kind of refreshing, because like they're so just transparent in their bullshit artistry.
Honestly, is this an American thing? I feel like this is an American thing that we have this weird respect for both artists.
Oh, no. Maybe this is why I don't like him. I'm like, well, I don't get it.
I mean, this is the other problem, too,
Dear listeners, I am the non-American on the call.
Like when you want to talk to somebody straight and you want them to give you a straight answer, this is the most annoying thing, right? Because nothing he ever says is a straight answer.
Yep.
Nothing. And it's all got strings attached, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's stuff about Sam that comes out later, and I'm also just like, I don't know. He's
look,
just an anomaly.
The actor is absolutely doing his best with what he's been given.
Oh yeah, I don't fault the actor for any of this.
No, and I thoroughly enjoy watching the actor. Don't get me wrong. It's just this is an obnoxious character to me personally.
Nope. I think that's a pretty universal take on Sam Weiss. But you either love him or you hate him for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I don't know anyone who looks at that man and goes, that man is 100% genuine.
Or
that
man is 100% my favorite character in this show.
Yeah.
Although actually, if there is someone at home who feels that way, please let us know. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Give me your take.
Tell us why.
So on that note, murder cancer.
Murder cancer.
Yeah. And now we're back to the Jacksonville trials. You know, that bad penny that keeps turning up.
I do love that Broyles and Nina literally mention that at the end of this episode and say, hey, listen, there are 50 odd other kids out there with powers that might be awakened at some point in the near future. Maybe we should have a contingency plan for this.
You know that list you keep saying you don't have? Hear me out. If a list just magically appeared, no questions asked, I won't even be too mad about it. But if one could I think you're running out of room in your basement of mistakes,
of
Nina.
Patients.
of patients put under medical comas. You know, I don't think you truly appreciate, Nina. And I know we have more money than God in Massive Dynamic, but I don't think you appreciate just how much care even forcibly comatose patients are. And I feel like that's a lot of nurses you have to pay very well to shut the up. Right. And I feel like this is a liability for you. So maybe, Nina, just give me the list of names.
She doesn't have a list, Nella. She doesn't have a list.
I wish so hard that Broyles had done that.
Nina
shady lady.
Nina Sharp is one of those who holds on to her receipts for at least 2 years and then still tries to go to the store and cash that in when she has to make a return. Don't tell me that Nina Sharp doesn't have a list unless William Bell himself burned that list. And then was like, give me your copy so I can burn that too. Now give me the copy of your copy so I can burn that as well, because this information can never be let out.
And he doesn't seem like he's enough of a micromanager to have thought about any of this to that level of detail.
Precisely. Mm-hmm. The level of his micromanagement is like, here's a galaxy brain idea. We'll cut out bits of my friend's brain and put them into other people. Mm-hmm. And that will never be a problem ever.
No one else will ever know where I hid these brain bits.
And I'm just like, you could have just destroyed the brain bits, and then
no one would have had him.
Nobody would have had that information.
He and Walter have this real thing about refusing to destroy their past experiments, and I know what it is. They're unable to shake the belief that if they could come up with an idea, then surely maybe someone else could too. And so they always think somewhere in the back of their heads that I need to keep my idea alive so that just in case someone else comes up with it, I'm able to stop them.
And yet it seems like every problem we found is people not coming up with their own ideas, but just stealing yours.
Yep.
Well, aside from the Nazi grandfather. He was a card-carrying member of the Nazi party and then he flipped. But he was a Nazi. Don't sit here and tell me that Wilhelm Bishop was not at one point sitting there being like, oh, the Nazis seem like a pretty good party, and then realized, oh, maybe they're not. I should probably work for the Americans now. Anyway, so this murder cancer moves really fast, and wow, we got really off topic. But the point is, we have another example of another person that was affected by the Cortexiphan trials, and Liv having to chase down her own history, really, and put together the pieces. And, I mean, look, this smacks, again, back to our, pituitary problem guy. But the thing is, like, I think there is more sympathy for Neil Wilson, who gets activated. Mm-hmm. And then his power is he can, swap out his energy for someone else's. Or at least someone else's who was in the trial. Now, he was dying of cancer. Him and his sister were experimented on. She visited him every day, held his hand. And after he's activated, that kills her. Because he takes her good health and she gets insta-cancer. And it kills her. And he ends up chasing down several other members of the experiment. And the implication being, he's not doing it because he's like, I'm going to live forever. It's because I need to live long enough to find the man who did this to me because my sister died because of it. I need to find that man.
Yeah, it's a revenge story by way of just taking out people along the way. Just so happens to be that way is cancer.
Love a secret revenge story. That should be on this podcast bingo card.
You're right. That's on Danielle's bingo card, like just all the time.
Did anyone else's soul shrivel up in terror when Liv leaves her apartment and he's there? Yes! And he gives her the same line of, we used to be in school together. Nate sent me. And it's like, but we all know what happened.
Nick,
She knows Nick.
Yeah.
We all know Nick's dead. Nick's dead. He's dead.
Oh, yes.
But she doesn't let it slip because she's a professional.
Yes.
It's very, very tense. It's very suspenseful.
I mean, that entire apartment,
so good.
That entire apartment fight scene was super tense.
Yeah.
I thought. Yeah. Because she can't fight him properly because in order to hit him, she has to touch him. She just kind of has to whack at him with candlesticks and lamps and really anything she can grab. Of course, she calls Peter. Here's Danielle coming in with the with the ship.
Peter's number 3 on her speed dial. I can't get over Peter being like, so you called me before Broyles, huh? You're on a speed dial. Oh, I'm on a Liv's speed dial. Well, I couldn't imagine my sister or, the place I always order from being any help. And I loved it so much.
It's so good.
What's so funny to me is she had literally just called Broyles for something else. But I think,
so she didn't hit redial, she hit speed dial.
She hit speed dial. Well, I couldn't figure out if she'd called him on a cell phone or her house phone.
No, it was a house phone. She reached for the house phone, so she has him on speed dial on her house phone.
House phone.
That's
Liv.
She wants it. She wants it really bad.
Well, we know that.
Just those 3 a.m. sweet nothings.
Walter needs to talk to him so that she can console him in his time.
I know. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know we skipped over this in the previous episode, but while we're on the ship conversation, when he invites her inside in the previous... While we're on the ship, in the previous episode, when he invites her inside for pizza so they can noodle over the case.
Yes.
I almost died.
You're not slick, Peter. That's why I love you. Peter,
buddy.
He has been so obvious this whole time.
He's trying so hard.
I mean, the only more obvious thing he can do is lay in a bed of roses, half naked and being like, anytime,
I'm right here.
I'm right here.
With a strategically placed bouquet.
No, but he respects her too much, and he would. No, I do love though that we are playing the game in the show of Peter has never had roots really anywhere, and he loves Liv so much that even the thought of losing her because he messes up their relationship is like, nope, I would be happy just being friends. I don't know what that's like at all.
Yeah, I mean, and he will wait.
He
will wait.
dying.
He will wait and wait and wait until she is actually ready.
Yeah.
He is not one to push. And so,
oh no,
we
am
love
I
him.
the Peter in this scenario?
Swear jar.
He might be. Too long didn't read. This episode is trying to hunt down yet another, mass murdering killer. It's just this one is sympathetic. And they put him in a medical coma. I mean, yeah, again, like the problem with like murder revenge stories is that like eventually the bodies catch up to you and
Right. Yeah, and the first one was an accident and the second one was an accident. And I know it was for a justifiable cause, ? But you still murdered 3 people after that.
justifiable to him.
That's why
Definitely a villain.
Look, it's still better than Ted
Definitely
Bundy with
sympathetic villain, but
It
definitely
is
a
still better than Ted Bundy with a pituitary problem.
Yes. No, this
For sure.
this I will concede 100%
For
better than Ted Bundy with a pituitary problem. No, I felt really bad for him.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this isn't a spoiler because we obviously saw him in an induced coma. This is not the last time we see this man. And that's
This
all I'm
show
gonna
does
say.
love its callbacks.
That's a question. If you could have one really terrible X-Men's power, like Rogue, which one would it be and why?
Ooh.
Wait, didn't we ask that? No, maybe we didn't.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean,
Listeners, let
a
us
good
we
know.
can
one.
save it for later, but like if you were triggered to suddenly evolve some sort of like kind of not great superpower, which one would it be and why?
And by not great, do we mean harmful to other people, or do we just mean
I think I leave that up to the
Not
discretion
great.
of the person answering because it's kind of like be something that's either like kind of useless and like Polka Dot Man. I kept saying this. It's like he's like Polka Dot guy from Suicide Squad, but with cancer.
See, the first thing that came to mind for me was moist, but I will take either.
We'll take either. But yeah, no, I think that brings us to the next episode, unless there was anything we missed.
I think the only thing that was important the only other thing that was important in that episode is that right at the end of it, we get a reversal, right? Because again, with the bookends on these episodes, at the beginning of the episode, Olivia wants to tell Peter and Walter does not. At the end of the episode, Olivia has changed her mind. Actually, I've decided that some truths are more harmful when said out loud. And Walter changes his mind and decides, I am going to tell Peter. I just have to find the right way to do it. Which leads us very nicely to...
Yeah, and
Right
having been
to
in
it.
many situations where you know a truth that you know will hurt 2 people you care about deeply, and you try to encourage the person that needs to speak the truth to speak it, but also, I mean, also knowing that, like, if I don't say something and this person finds out, like, I will rightfully be hated by them because I didn't say something sooner.
Yeah.
And and that's a tough position to be in. And I love that Liv was like, this will hurt him too much. I've come around on this. I'm actually not too gung-ho to tell him anymore. But Walter is like, look, it's been too long. Would his life have been different had I told him years ago?
Yeah,
Instead
and
of
it's time for him to right the wrongs that he's caused, which he's right about. I also think, Olivia didn't say this in the episode, but I wonder whether part of her also thinks that it isn't really her place to step in the middle of these two because they're family, this is father and son, and ultimately they need to work this out.
Right. Exactly. It is not up to her to share this secret because technically it's not her secret to share. She just stumbled upon it.
Yeah.
Because of her Cortexiphan powers.
Because she was afraid. Because she likes him and she's afraid to be vulnerable and she was afraid. Oh no.
Which, again, nice transition right over the white tulip.
I know. So now Walter is afraid.
Yes.
Walter spends. I feel so bad for Walter in this episode. Rightly so. He's basically just turning himself into knots, trying to figure out a good way to tell him. And like, how do I sit down and say something? And then he decides, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to write a letter, because the letter will have everything I need to say all there in black and white, and he'll read it and he'll understand. But every time he thinks about him reading it, he's just like, and then he's never going to talk to me again. And that's it.
Yep.
And I will have blown it with my son.
I like that the time travel gimmick in this episode lets us see Walter go through that decision multiple times. Now, Walter isn't aware that he's gone through the decision multiple times. We are. Right. But in one of those, what do you call it? Timelines. Loops. In one of those timelines or loops, he pockets the letter and he decides he's going to give it to Peter whenever he gets his sign from God, which is a white tulip. And in another one of those loops, he straight burns the letter, you know? So I kind of imagine that we only got to see 3 loops. Maybe there were 17 of them. And depending on the moment, Walter made a different decision.
And look, I did really enjoy this episode because, you know, it does the thing. And then it gives it this really great bittersweet story. And I think a really great bittersweet character. However, I can't get over my head with the Star Trek idea of time travel, which is, okay, but every time you mess with time, you actually create an alternate universe. Like, in your perception of things, you made the time jump and those people never died, but there is still the world where time went forward and they did die. And you have done this Lord knows how many times, Alistair. Like, there are 2, like, in the Star Trek universe, his body count is insurmountable.
Right.
And
or, you know, name another show that deals with the multiverse, right? The Rick and Morty.
Yes. Oh, Rick and Morty. Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah.
Nella just got transported to a place in time.
Yes. I'm imagining Walter in the Rick and Morty universe, and I'm horrified. Okay. Things we never want for 2000,
that is a sandbox in which Walter can never play. Nope.
Anyway.
So anyway, yes, in Fringe, because Fringe is Fringe, multiverses and time loops can both exist.
Yes.
This is true.
And we'll allow it. Now, here's my big question, because, I mean, we go through this Groundhog Day thing with Alistair Peck, who is the scientist trying to go back in time to the moment where his fiancée was killed in a car crash. Now, do you think his plan was to pull her out? Or do you think he just wanted to die with her? Like, was he smart enough to know, I can't change what happened, but I want to have been there. And I want the moment to say I'm sorry.
He told Walter he was going to pull her out of the car.
Right.
I think that's a very interesting question. And I think it's both, because I think up until he gets to the car and he actually sees her and he's sitting there next to her, I think up until that moment, he actually thinks he's going to save her and live out the rest of his life, whatever that may be.
But then a part
even
of me
though
is just
he's
like,
turned himself into this like monster with a Faraday cage in his skin. But I think as soon as he sees her, he's so struck by her because he hasn't had her alive in 10 months.
Right.
All he can do is sit there and he's like, you know what? This is enough. And he just tells her he loves her and like, that's it.
I mean, to me, it's the fact that instead of going for her door to pull her out, he goes to the passenger side and he closes the door.
Yep.
And maybe that was never his plan, and you know, maybe talking to Walter made him realize, like, you know, I have done what I can to make sure I can get back there far enough without killing anyone. But he's right. This isn't how time works. So I'm deciding to do this.
And this is how we close the loop.
This is how you prevent the paradox from happening, because if he doesn't survive that either, he never creates time travel. He never does any of those loops.
I would believe that. I would also believe that there wasn't a way for him to perfectly time, mostly because we the audience don't get to see him practice this. You know, it's not like he's practiced starting at the field and running to the car.
You need to use base 9. And then he's like,
exactly.
Okay, great. And then he goes.
Right. Exactly, but he didn't know that it would take him until 2:18 on that day to get to the car, and you see him like sprinting and pushing through the crowd and like trying to get to her. I don't know.
Now, that would have been a good detail, though, where you see him jogging from the field like an early morning.
Yes.
And he's jogging from the field to a spot, and he's really booking it, he's timing himself.
There are two kinds of people in this world. And let me tell you, I am the kind that would have practiced that run.
No, I would have practiced that run, too. And I am not one who likes running, but I would have been we have one shot at this. There's no way I'm not timing this.
No, wait. So I have another question. Do we think the Faraday cage in his skin disappeared because in this timeline it will not have been created, and yet he's still from the future? Or do we think the Faraday cage is still in his body and he's just another comatose patient inside Massive Dynamic?
I think the Faraday cage is still in his body.
I think
How does that not make the news?
I know. Well, the entire... I don't know. Honestly.
Look, it's going to be a really interesting coroner's report. And but then again, how much? I don't think the guy really had family. He had a fiance. He didn't have
He had a
people.
coworker. He had a coworker who deeply cared about him, who she was like, I mean, I'm his only friend, but don't ask him.
Yeah.
You know?
And it would be a wild coroner's report, but they would find out that he's a theoretical physicist and he's written all of these volumes, and they would think, well, a little weird.
And who knows? And they, without any family, they might have just gone cremation. And then, there would have been, although with that much metal in his body, they probably wouldn't have. They would have been like, we can't cremate this guy. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't think we can burn this metal. I don't think that's safe.
It's a lot to sift through, because what happens is when you cremate a body, you still have to then take all the bits that are still whole and you have to grind them into the dust. And you do end up sifting out the metal bits. I'm sorry.
Just a bunch of gears and wires and sheeting.
That's a lot of metal to sift out.
And screws.
Yeah.
He has that one giant screw that is just in
so
his
weird.
chest. Super weird.
What is that doing there?
It's just a coil.
What is its purpose?
Coil. I don't know.
I feel like this would end up being a Mr. Ballin YouTube video where it's just like the man died in a car crash, but what happened next was crazy.
Yeah. No, this is 100% that. The coroner didn't understand what to do, and you'll see why in a moment.
Over the course of 10 months, this man had surgically implanted all manner of devices into his body, pretty much creating a Faraday cage under his skin. Now, no one's really quite sure how he didn't die of sepsis, but the important thing is, I've been watching so much Mr. Ballad on YouTube, it's kind of ridiculous.
And then there were a bunch of theories. Was the metal keeping him alive? Did he just develop
a tolerance?
Is
that a thing?
Alistair Peck was a theoretical physicist who was obsessed with time travel. I could.
That's the cut we should put on Twitter. Right there. Theoretical physicist.
Anyway,
Okay,
I'm always love a time travel episode. We just watched the Doctor Strange What If Marvel, where it's just don't go back in time and try to save the woman you love. All right, well, no spoilers, but don't go back in time and try to save the woman you love.
I mean, yes, standard time travel. Rule number 1,
It's very white
Truly.
tulip, but in a very specific way. It scratches a certain itch I think I had with Doctor Strange that I didn't expect.
Yeah.
Which I think is super cool.
Okay, amazing. I'm a little behind. I've only watched 3 episodes of that show so far.
No, fair.
But anyway,
back to the point. The name of the episode, White Tulip. The whole point is Walter and Alistair have a heart-to-heart of two minds who are very much on the same page. And Walter, this whole episode has been like, if I were 20 years younger and had 3 people working for me, I could figure this out. And
he does without being 20 years younger or having 3 people to figure it.
I mean, this is also where I'm like, he knows how to manipulate people.
He's brilliant.
He makes them think he doesn't understand it when he does. That's why he wants to go in there. That's why he wants to go in there alone to actually talk to him and be like, by the way, your math is wrong. You need to carry the 1. And then he's just like, yeah, no, I do understand what you're trying to do. And I'm here to tell you that you really shouldn't do it because I did the same thing and I messed with fate.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I think the writers are probably really proud of themselves and patting themselves on the back, and I think they deserve it because here we get yet another mirror. How many of them have I listed in the last 3 episodes? But yet another mirror where Walter and Alistair are basically having the conversation that Walter had with his assistant, whose name I'm blanking on because I keep on thinking of Astrid's name, Carla.
Dr. Carla Warren.
Yes,
Dr.
I will never drop
Carla
that doctor now whenever I refer to her.
Absolutely not. But in the, this time through, Walter is Dr. Carla Warren, and he's saying there are things in the universe that aren't our job to adjust. And there are things that we are not supposed to do.
And in a way, admitting that he didn't listen to her that night when he probably should have.
She was right. She was absolutely right. And so Walter asks God for a sign of forgiveness. A specific one, a white tulip.
And I do appreciate that Alistair Peck has the wherewithal to be being shot at and still has enough time and no, I have to do this for him, where he draws a white tulip on a piece of paper and...
As only a professor can, with like these beautiful lines and shapes, and then stuffs it in his pocket.
Right.
And he leaves that envelope for his like one work friend to send to Walter on the day where he is contemplating giving this letter to Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also the day where Walter burns the letter, which then, of course, comes to the question of, well, you make the point of, but this time he burns it. And maybe there were 17 other times where half of one way he puts in his pocket and half the other he doesn't. But this is the one time where he didn't get a call saying, we
got a job.
Hey, we have a train. Like, you love trains. Like, and he wasn't interrupted in his reverie contemplating this envelope and shoving it in his pocket because he has to go. And he doesn't want to leave it. He has to keep it with him. So I think that's really where the difference lies. He just has the time to really think about it.
And second guess himself, too, I think.
Yeah.
He doesn't have Peter in his ear talking about, essentially their relationship and how close they've gotten. Like the fact that Peter calls him up and like jokes a little bit about like, yeah, pick up the phone. It's the thing ringing in the bottom corner and press the little triangle
it's the
button.
Black button. We've talked about this.
Yeah. But instead, Peter walks in after he throws it in the fire with the turntable he fixed for him.
But he gets his white tulip, which in his mind
tulip
means
came from God.
That I know. Which in his mind, he's just like, wait a minute.
And there's that moment where he kind of looks up and things like, And there's the part of me that, in their previous conversation, Alistair had said, God is science. God acts through science and technology and medical expertise or knowledge. So I suppose that is precisely what happened here.
Yeah.
I mean, not in so many words, but basically that. And I think he gets his answer, but I don't know that he thinks about that answer in the same way. And I think we have just enough time for one more thing, if anybody has one more thing.
Oh, I do.
Dear. I know you do. I'm going to struggle.
So, look, I know the flashback episode was a very serious episode. But look, you could have had some really fun, wild 80s hairstyles for Nina's, but I also appreciate that Nina is precisely that swear jar that found her hairstyle in 1985, and she stayed the course with unwavering devotion to that single hairstyle.
With the bangs and the
bangs and like the sharp, like just above the shoulders bob. Sharp. You cut paper with that bob. Like, amazing.
I think my one more thing is also about Nina, when Olivia comes to her and is just like, this person is apparently murdering through cancer, and it only happens to be kids who survived the cortexiphan trials. And it's literally Nina goes, oh my, well, that's not good, is it? What did she say?
I wrote down all of the drama in that scene and none of the of course, the line I have chosen to write down is, I've always been a little foggy as to your motives. When Olivia's talking about her, because I love that for Nina in this show.
But also that.
And I also
Olivia
love.
is also just like, you've literally kept information from me before, Nina.
Yes,
so stop
exactly.
playing coy.
Yes.
I mean,
This is Nina. Fantastic. I also, the line I wrote down Nina saying is, I recognize the look in your eyes. You're not prepared to lose him. You came here to have me talk you out of it.
yes.
And I like that is Nina reflecting on Raiden Lake, the previous episode, and knowing Elizabeth, knowing Walter. She literally knows that look in Olivia's eyes. And it's not just this little gimmicky, oh, you're in love. No, she knows the look of someone who does not want to lose Peter.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
What if that's my one more thing? I also appreciate that there have been a few whiskey nights for Olivia throughout these episodes. It's been a rough couple of episodes for Olivia. Every time they zoom in on her, she's having a little sip of something, and I just can't wait until Rachel is a big part of her life again and they can have that whiskey together.
Right.
Tuesdays. What was it?
Rachel is whiskey. Rachel is number one on your speed dial. Please call her, Olivia.
Right. But you know she's number one on the speed dial because Liv is worried about her, not because like she can rely on Rachel.
Oh, that's 100% how that works. I think we got everything we needed.
I think we did. 80s hairstyle included. All right, listeners, with that, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, if you could ask God for a sign of forgiveness, what would you ask for and why? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/bachpod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
And so,
oh no,
am
am I the Peter in this scenario?
Swear jar. She might be.
She is very talkative today. I don't know what's going on. She wants to be involved in the Fringe conversation.
I also have feelings about this ship. I'm a cat,
opinions.
and I ship Peter with Liv. You're screaming, and I want to scream as well.
I need to stop being dumb and just get it done.